So, Nick, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. I'm very excited to have you here. And I talked a little bit about your background, but why don't you tell us more about yourself? Because it's always good to hear the story from the person rather than me talk about it.
Wow, a nice wide open question
Yes.
that I never know really where to start. So we'll start with I'm 44. Well, actually, I'm 43. I keep saying 44. I'm nearly 40. I'm nearly 44. I'm 43. 44 in
Mm.
November. I am a type 1 diabetic, also a double cancer survivor. I've lived in Dubai now for nearly a year and a half, nearly 2 years. The second time round, I'm from a place called the Isle of Man, a tiny little island with a population of 80,000 in the middle of the Irish Sea. And I left to come to Dubai for the first time in 2009, where I met my wife, who is a Kiwi. And we moved to Singapore together, spent 6 years there before coming back to Dubai. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 14. It was October, whatever year that was, long time ago now. 30 years this year, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And when they diagnosed me, in those days, I was admitted to hospital for 2 weeks. I was given an orange and a bunch of hypodermic needles to practice on. Not sure that really an orange really replicates the skin when I think back, but after all these years, but that's what they did in those days. Then I was sent home, and the first piece of advice I was given was to test the hypo. So feel what it's like. So make myself go into hypoglycemia, which we did. And I got to eat digestive biscuits, and it was really good fun at the time. I'm not sure I'd do it again now, but yeah, it's a little brief summary of me.
Yeah, I've heard doctors say that what they used to do, now they don't do that to tell you to learn how to deal with a hypo and make yourself hypoglycemic, but they used to do it under medical supervision in the hospital so that parents and children could learn how to manage low blood sugars, which would be really frightening. Of course, the first time we had a hypo, we were outside the hospital and, didn't know quite what to do and different things like that. So it's changed a lot. And how do you remember how it felt at 14? Was it challenging, or was it just really kind of matter of fact about it? And
yeah, it depends on which way you look at it. So internally accepting it as this is life now was fine. It was matter of fact. I actually said to my parents, does that mean I have to I can give up chocolate now? Because I was quite flumpy, let's call it, not fat. But I was kind of definitely a slightly porkier young boy. Although I played football, I carried some extra pounds. And then I lost the weight, and then for some reason I thought, chocolate's going to make the difference. I won't be allowed chocolate anymore, so I'll stop going to the sweetie shop. That didn't happen. But I accepted that this was it. This was what life was going to be like. But the acceptance level in terms of actually sharing about the diabetes and helping other people understand where I was and how I felt, I didn't come to terms with that for a really long time, maybe 20 years. Really, really long time. It took until probably I met my wife in 2009 to really start talking about it and sharing with people what it was like. But until then, I kind of felt, you just don't need to know, because then you might ask me questions and then you might feel sorry for me, and I don't want people to feel sorry for me. And I never really grasped how it could impact people done well, and I really only conceived the negative implications that it had on me and the stigma that having an illness carries with it in the general scheme of things.
and was it one kind of event in general, or was it just meeting your wife and talking about it more and then realizing it over time? Or was there something that happened? Because sometimes people go through things and they think, wow, this can really help a lot of people if I share it.
Yeah, actually, the wife part was more accepting just talking to close people that are closer friends, because I wouldn't even show my friends that I was taking insulin when we were going out and things like that. It was it was quite hidden at the time. And then talking to my wife was the first time I'd really expressed or the how the diabetes really affects me, and what I need to do to control it, and elements like that. But then it was probably only 5 years ago that I started talking about it. Maybe 2016 actually, where I started talking about it openly, and it was triathlon that actually got me talking about it. Because triathlons, there's lots of inspirational, or well, yeah, it's inspirational people in and around triathlon, or let's call it an Ironman community, where they do this crazy long triathlon, and people find themselves. And I think that's what I kind of did. I realized that there was a community here where I could help them understand that diabetes doesn't have to stop you doing things. Previously, I'd done things and just not told people I had diabetes. So I learned to skydive, and I didn't tell anyone, which was a stupid thing to do. But I was too afraid. I was too afraid somebody would reject me and not allow me to do what I was wanting to do, even though I knew the boundaries, knew how to manage it, knew what to look for, knew what blood sugars needed to be before we went up in the aeroplane, knew all of those things. That fear that somebody would take the opportunity away from me stopped me from talking about it. And then the triathlon journey really started to open my eyes that actually this is nothing more than just an opportunity to help people understand that it's difficult to live with, but I have controls. Living healthily is directly in my focus. I have no choice but to think about my health every single day. And I look at many people around the world now, globally, in my office even, that don't take health seriously. And that's across many places I've been in the last 5 or 6 years. And that theme really started to resonate a lot, and how I could help people become healthier, and how I could share my story that hopefully that they would grab hold of and say, you know what, this isn't impossible. We can do this. We just need to make some basic changes, or look at things slightly with a slightly different lens, and which is often the way I try to look at the world.
I love that. There's so much within there that you said that's inspiring, and I have so many questions. And the first thing is that telling someone about diabetes versus jumping out of a plane was more frightening to you. That's one observation.
Yeah. Well, I think so it wasn't, I mean, I manage risk a lot. So I'm continually looking at where's the risk that's no longer controllable in my current abilities or current skill sets. And I just felt that I could control my diabetes well enough that I didn't need to tell anyone, for the sake of, 12 years ago, learning to skydive, diabetes was still one of those things where the doctors would reject you, never mind the actual skydiving zones. So I chose to do something I don't advise anyone to do, and I would never advocate this again, is that I just didn't tell anybody. And I ticked the other box on the form, and I carried on. And that was driven not because I was afraid of telling people, I was afraid of the fear of not being allowed to do it.
Yeah, there's nothing being worse than someone telling you no. I even saw that in my son when he was 4 or 5 years old. He was afraid that he would be, of course, for a child, being left out, or someone to tell you no, or as a parent, someone to tell your kid no when you know that they're able and
Yeah.
healthy and they can do it. There's nothing more infuriating. So I get that. But yes, if you're listening, you don't have to tell everybody, but I think on a need to know basis, like if your child's going to university and they have a roommate, your roommate should probably know that they have type 1 and kind of how to help if needed. Or if you are doing something like skydiving, you know, if there's a hypo or hyper, or I'm not sure, skydiving, I assume blood sugars go up from adrenaline.
You could get a mixture of both, really. But what I would, in my new way of thinking in the world, I'd advocate not telling anybody, and being open with as many people as you possibly can be, because what my realization from all of this is there are no real boundaries to what we can do. Now there are things that becoming an airline pilot, clearly there are things that we can't absolutely fully control, and being in control of the lives of 250 people for 8 hours is something that we can't absolutely say we have full control over. So fair enough, we can't become commercial airline pilots. However, jumping out of an aeroplane, which takes 15 minutes from top to bottom, where we have controllable variables, there is no reason not to talk to somebody and tell them, because we are allowed to actually do it. We just need to make sure that we tick all the right boxes and we talk to the right people, and they are comfortable that we know what we're doing. And the fears I had should never have existed. They shouldn't exist today. Certainly the world has moved on in terms of the diabetes space, in terms of what people are able to do now. There are diabetics that are skydiving, good ones at that. So yeah, I would say, yeah, don't lie.
Yeah,
I should
no,
know.
that's
I should never have done it. And I'm telling people about it more because, not because I think it was the right thing to do. It's more because I want to talk about the fear that existed within me. That was, looking back, it was like, you idiot, why? That's the stupidest thing. But it was real at the time. It was really real, and I felt the reality of it. But really, when I think back and think about what I was doing and where I was at the time, it was like, if I'd have just had people to talk to, I might have done something different. I might have managed the situation differently. And that's what I would advocate now as a diabetic, type 1 or type 2, is to talk to a confidant, whether it's a coach, whether it's another diabetic mentor, whether it's your doctor, whether it's your endocrinologist, your parents, your brothers, sisters, whatever, your best friends. Talk about it. And those fears will often fall by the wayside as you get to see as the world opens up to you, instead of being so narrowly focused, which is what tended to happen to me in those times. I was so focused on just becoming a skydiver, I ignored all of the things that I should have been thinking about and risk managing, which is what this is about. It's about we're risk managing a condition for the rest of our life. Wow. So talking to people would have helped me do that, and I just didn't see it at the time. I just wish I'd have seen it at the time differently. But now talking about it.
Amazing. So how did you get involved in triathlons?
So we moved to Singapore, and I started a new job. We lived. Singapore's really awkward. You have to get, so where we lived, we had to get a bus journey from the condo to the train station, then the train to the office. Now, for most people, that would feel like that's not a problem. However, when you've grown up and lived all your life driving door to door, it becomes, this is difficult. And I met one of the guys at the office who rode to work, cycled. So I started cycling from home to the office. The guy that was in the office cycled in a cycling team. I got to join the cycling team. And one day, through a contact I met in the cycling team, I went for a ride with a guy who had an Ironman tattoo. This was February 2016. I remember it vividly. We were at a petrol station in a place called Punggol in Singapore. And I said to him, "Oh, where did you do your Ironman? I'm really interested." And he goes, "Oh," started talking about it. He goes, "Oh, my wife and I are going to Putrajaya in Malaysia in 8 weeks' time. You should come along." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Oh yeah, you'd be fine." I said, "You think I'm fit enough?" And he goes, yeah, you'd be fine." It was a half Ironman distance, so it's 70.3 miles of swim, bike, and run. So not being particularly detail orientated, I just went, "Well, okay then." So I went home, spoke to my wife and said, "Well, we're going to do a half Ironman." Bear in mind, I'd not swum for probably 12 years.
That was my first question, because all the Iron men and women that I know, it's the swimming that's the biggest challenge. That was my first question. Were you swimming a lot?
No.
Okay.
I hadn't. We had a 50-meter pool in our condo, and I hadn't swum in it, and we'd been there a year.
Oh, wow.
So, and I hadn't been swimming maybe since, well, I don't know, maybe 12, 15 years.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second to move your mic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that
cool.
better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Something happened. Okay.
So I hadn't swam for maybe 12, 15 years, maybe even longer, and I'd never really swam. I went to the pool with my friends and we played in the water. I remember swimming 50 meters once and being so out of breath that I had to get out. And this then became an 8-week, we have to figure out how we're going to go from 0 to swimming 2 kilometers. So I started going down into the pool to start swimming. I have a video somewhere where I'm practicing my kick. So I have a kickboard in front of me and I'm actually kicking and going backwards. That was quite amusing because that should never happen.
Yeah, I don't even know how that works.
It's something to do with stiff ankles.
Okay. Now I'm going to try to do it.
Yeah.
I'm really curious.
I'll send you the video.
Oh my goodness.
It's really, it's quite amusing. And then I did my first ever open water swimming practice with the 2 people I was going with. And it was across a beach that was 500 meters long. And this beach had 2 coves inside. So if I describe it, it kind of one straight line and then 2 kind of half moon coves. And we started swimming and I had got my head down and the next thing I'm touching sand. And I'm like, wow, how am I that fast? So I then looked up and what I'd done is I'd started going straight and immediately turned left without looking. And I'd swam back into more or less where I'd started. And I was kind of going, well, okay, this is going to be a challenge. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do this. So then I then started for the next 7 weeks. I started swimming 3 times a week in the ocean because it was near to where my office was. And I swam twice a week in the swimming pool as well, just to try and figure out how I make it 2 kilometers without dying. And then literally about 4 days before the event, the 2 people that the whole reason I was going there for, they pulled out and left me and my wife to go alone. I knew nobody there. I had no idea what to expect. I literally was I was using this guy to hold his hand really to figure out what to do. So then it was a case of, okay, I need to really work on this, and got thrown into the deep end. And we made an almighty amount of mistakes. It was, I remember I've got the pictures actually. I was looking at them the other day. And we've got pictures of my bike. And I've said this, I think mentioned this to you before. Now I'll do a half Ironman and I'll maybe eat 2 or 3 jelly sweets just to keep my blood sugars afloat. And I'll have some electrolytes. I had 60 seeded dates under my seat. I had 6 bottles of water with electrolytes and carbohydrates in the bottles. And I was only riding 90 kilometers. So it's 2 hours, 45 minutes. and I had some other things on my bike as well. It was the heaviest thing in the world, and I don't think I put my hands into the dates once. So it's kind of okay. That's another lesson. And then there was the half marathon run afterwards, and that was, you know, it was roughly 38 degrees and 75% humidity, and I'd not really experienced those conditions at midday before, and after doing that kind of level of exercise. So I ended up walking a lot of the way, and then ended up on a drip after the event to try and rehydrate, because I was being sick and I almost passed out. My blood sugars were fine. And it was one of those experiences. I said to my wife after, I'm never doing this ever again, selling my bike. So what I did is, we got home, I sold my bike, I bought a new one, and I registered for an Ironman in the December of the same year. So I didn't give up. We carried on. We realized we made a few mistakes. We learned a whole load of lessons in terms of how to manage tension, anxiety, glucose, blood sugar with that anxiety. And we've gone on leaps and bounds since then, and we've actually started to really achieve things from an athletics perspective. I would never have called myself an athlete in my past life. I was a footballer at best, not the best one in the world, but an okay one, a soccer, if you're American.
Football warrior.
Yeah, good. And to be honest, then things started to get extreme. So we did the full Ironman in December 2016, where a full Ironman is 4 kilometer swim, it's a 180 kilometer bike ride, and then it's a marathon. And we achieved a really good time for a first timer. So 10 hours, 37 minutes, I think it was.
That is amazing.
So yeah, so a sub 4 hour marathon off a 35 kilometer an hour bike ride, and for 180 kilometers. And my swim actually wasn't that bad. It was only an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
In the February, in the half Ironman, it took me 55 minutes to finish 2 kilometers. I then did a full Ironman swim in 1 hour 15. So the progress was incredible. And then we really start to see that endurance was possible and going longer. It started with the bike, really. We were personal friends with a guy who had done a race called Race Across America, which is 5,000 kilometers, 55,000 meters of climbing, and you do it in 12 days maximum. And we started riding together and going on 200, 300 kilometer rides. Then a small group of us did what we called the Vision Quest 1500, which was raising money for Vision Quest. And that was riding from, I've forgotten the name of the place in Thailand now, but it was 1,500 kilometers from somewhere to Phuket. And I can't remember the place now. I'll remember it sometime. A reasonable destination. Yes, and that was 1,500 kilometers, and we did that in 5.5 days. And then the next one was we did an ultra triathlon. So we went to Australia and we did a 3-day triathlon, which culminated in a 10-kilometer swim, a 145 kilometer bike ride on day 1. Then day 2 was a 275 kilometer bike ride, and then day 3 was 2 marathons back to back. I was 3rd last coming out of the water, and then 6th fastest coming off the bike. So it's kind of like
things can shift in a triathlon because I mean, there's so many things exciting about triathlons, and especially ultra ones and Ironman, and things change so quickly. It's not about like who's in first or last. And I using the term loosely, like ran a marathon. And once I told my son when he was really, really small, and he says, "Mommy, did you win?" I was like, definitely not. If anything, I finished last place because I got injured on the way, and the whole other things, that happen the first time you do something. But that's the
Yeah.
thing I love about it. It's so exciting. And you mentioned mistakes, but actually those are just learning curves. And, you know, better to be over prepared than to be not prepared and have to
Yeah.
drop out. And you just learn
Yeah.
something new every time, I guess.
Definitely. And so, something that links back to my diabetes, but also links back to the sport, probably, it's probably easier to describe to people, is I'm a big believer in reflection. Mistakes happen. Mistakes are mistakes, and you know, we're all going to make them. We can't protect everybody or anybody from a mistake. All we can do is make sure that we reflect on the things, that the actions that we've done in the past, and think about, could we done them of any better? Could we have done them any better, or is there anything that we could have done differently? Are there any skills? Is there any knowledge we could have understood, taken on board, so we could progress? And that's all I've really done, is just thought back. After everything I do, I think back about what I learned, and what I learned about the experience. And I have this thing called kind of it's kind of a reflection framework, and I look at learning from 4 different perspectives. So how am I thinking about the situation? That's my first reflection point. My second reflection point were, what were my behaviors on that, in that particular period when I'm working around that action? Then the third part of that reflection is around, what was my environment like? Was I in the right environment for that thing that I was doing? And then the fourth part of that reflection phase is, did I have the right tools to do the job that I wanted to do? And then what naturally comes out of that reflection, upon reflection on action, we'll call it, is that there generally comes themes that fall out the outside that say, these are what you need to do next. Because you'll have new insights, because you're thinking about it from an internal perspective, an external perspective, a hard perspective. And often what people fail to do, they fail to represent, well, what was in my control? How was I thinking about the situation? Which is where most of the time things go wrong, because we get so stressed out and so hyper focused on one thing, we lose sight of all the other things. And that can be represented into diabetes as well. And I think how we manage and how we think about control, whether it's about insulin management, whether it's about calorie management, whether it's about carbohydrate management, whether it's about stress, exercise, holidays, whatever it might be, we can learn lots of lessons, and you learn to do it quicker and quicker over time. So now I don't write anything down, I just think it through,
I love
and it
that.
happens.
I wrote it down, like, even for myself, I'm like, this is amazing. So
Yeah.
to think about it and reflect, and I mean, yeah, mistakes or learning opportunities, you know, because sometimes if we say mistake, some people can really beat themselves up. Oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And even as a parent, sometimes trying to, you know, it can be like an exam or something, and just looking at it holistically rather than, you know, what just only what happened or the final outcome, because there's a whole process to take in.
Yeah, and I tend also I try not to think about the why of a situation. So why did I do that? Because that doesn't really help me. It just takes me into a spiral of negativity. So what I'm actually looking at is, what happened and what could I do differently next time? What was I thinking at that particular time? What are the things in my control that I can deal with? So, for example, the environment of a triathlon, I can't necessarily change the environment of the triathlon. I could choose a different race, but I can't necessarily change that environment of that particular race.
No, and weather can change, especially on the swim, water and all kinds of things can happen, right?
Yeah. So that's where we go. Yes, it was a thinking part. It's a part to reflect on. There's nothing I could do. Move on. And then you take ownership for things, and that's when change really happens for you. And it's certainly, that's what's happened with my diabetes as well. I've taken ownership of helping the world become a better place with diabetes in it. Because I don't think we're getting away with this anytime soon. I don't think there are potential cures and things that people are talking about. You know, there's some studies in Australia about stem cells, and you know, rather than pancreas replacements and stuff like that. But I'd let the scientists deal with that, and those of us who are either connected to somebody with diabetes or we have diabetes, manage what we can control, which is the food we put in our mouth, the amount of insulin we put in our body, and the amount of exercise we do that surrounds it, and the amount of stress that we add into that idea.
I love that.
They're the things we can control.
Exactly. And it's always heartbreaking too when someone's first diagnosed or a child is first diagnosed, because the first thing that happens is the mom or the parents are looking for the cure. Is there a cure? What's in the research? And there's a lot of good, like you said, stem cell research and other things that are happening. And even someone reached out recently, their second child was diagnosed with type 1. And they're asking about stem cell research, should they do something? And it's still too soon, even though there's been massive improvements. And I decided very early on in my son's diagnosis that our philosophy would be, we would love a cure. Who wouldn't? Everybody would. But we have this today, and we're going to live to the fullest today and do everything that we can with it or without it. It doesn't matter. I mean, it does require more attention, and it demands attention, actually.
Yeah.
But it's not going to stop us from doing anything. And we're going to learn how to live with it and work it into our life. Otherwise, then you're not really living if you're just waiting for the cure.
That's it. And I think how best to describe this without sounding like it's not something to worry about, because it can be. I think diabetes isn't the death sentence it was perceived to be many, many years ago. I had my parents knew some people with diabetes, in the 30s and 40s, and the prognosis for them was horrific. The prognosis for even me, who was diagnosed 30 years ago, where technology and the way we deliver insulin and the types of insulin has changed dramatically. Even my prognosis is still quite long, 70s, and I'm all right with that. Now people being diagnosed at this time, the management systems are so good. Why would life be any different?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because in getting to do a podcast now, it just exasperates it even more. I have met the most amazing people because of diabetes, and they're doing the most amazing things. And especially when it comes to athletics, it's almost like it's kind of this secret weapon, because you have another indicator that when you're achieving kind of optimal performance, when you're eating well, sleeping well, and all of those things. But like you said, there is no reason that it should stop anyone, because we have all these examples, yourself included, before us, that are doing these superhuman things that people without diabetes are not able to do. So it's a challenging diagnosis, no doubt. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, and there's a lot to deal with, but there's also a very happy ending to the story, should I say? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think you what you're doing is from a Diapoint perspective, I think the world needs more of it, because we need to make more connections to help diabetics and diabetic families at whatever age people are diagnosed from. Because I've got a friend here that was diagnosed at 30, and he's 37. He's got a wife and 2 kids. The 2 kids don't understand. So there are lots of understanding elements that need to happen, and I think the more communication we do to help people settle, because it's easy to become hyper stressed about a situation, and I'm sure we can all think back to a time where we've made a mountain out of a molehill. And I know that that's a gross oversimplification of diabetes, but we often make a mountain out of a molehill. And the number of parents now that I have and my type 1 diabetic friends have spoken to, that are getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in every other hour to test their children's blood sugars. It's like, wow, you must be exhausted.
We are.
Because and I'm like,
We are. I mean, I still honestly, if not every night now that we have some automation with the insulin pump, but if if we don't have a CGM on, I will definitely get up and check it. Because you would never, forgive yourself if something went horribly wrong. In the beginning, I was checking way too much, but then as you learn as you go, then it helps. But yes, it's exhausting. It's exhausting, the things that we do.
From my experience in 30 years, it's, as a diabetic, your sensory overload of a hypoglycemia is massive. Quite early when things are starting to change. And I think if we did more work around helping children identify the early signs, so whether it's tingling lips, whether it's a little bit of, I can't get the words out thinking, or, a tiny bit of sweatiness before it becomes a full-blown hypo that they can't recover. And I've always, in the night times, which is what most parents do, is actually the night times is where generally speaking, you will generally wake up, because the whole
my son always
rush.
did, fortunately. I guess adrenaline or whatever it is, but then I can only speak of my experience, because there's also like some kids, they say they don't feel hypos, and then that's a whole different animal. But
but I think that then comes down to how do we help them become sensitive? And I think it can often be spending more time thinking about it and focusing, because there are definitely signs. Even for a normal person, we'd call it bonking in the sports world. That's blood sugars hitting the floor.
Oh, I've had that before.
So it's coming. This
yes,
whole lightheadedness, this losing sensory motion.
I came upstairs and I was like, check my blood sugar. I'm having a low blood sugar. And it was so funny. My husband and my son were sitting there talking about something. They looked at me. They just kept doing what they were doing. I'm like, guys, low blood sugar, hypo. They're like, what? And then I did. And I think I was in the 70s. Because I didn't eat well balanced that day. I don't have diabetes, but it can happen to people. And I find if I'm not really eating well balanced, it can happen. It's happened a couple of times, but I know it, the cold sweats and all of that. So it's a matter of being in touch with it, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. And this is where I think great conversations with both peers of diabetes, parents and parent peers with diabetes, and coaches like you, that can really help and support people become more in tune with their diabetes and really bring their management to the forefront, to the focus. And I think what the biggest revolution so far for me, I've never worn a pump, by the way, and I've kind of gone, I do too many contact things, and so never really moved towards it. So that could be something I'm missing out on. But the thing for me is the whole Libre Dexcom components now. Really, there is no reason why parents should be waking up for their kids. There are the number of times, because I got my first Meow Meow to go on my Libre a few months ago, and I had nothing but pain from my wife as my Libre is screaming at me saying, your blood sugars are 80, it's going to go low. And she's like, will you turn that thing off and just get up and go and get some food? And it's kind of like, and because I'm quite cautious when it comes to, I set quite thin parameters as well, because I don't like going over 150 and I don't like going under 70.
It's easy to overtreat a hypo, and then it's all crazy after that, and it probably takes some time to get it to come back down and range again. And
so it's about tricky. Then managing the alarms and figuring out what alarms work best for everybody in the house.
Well, I think that's true. And my son just started going to a new doctor. She's amazing.
Mm.
And one of the first things she did when she looked at his pump, she's like, you're just like beeping all day, all these alarms. Let's like turn it off because you're in school. And the pump, and he uses a CGM with it, it's supposed to facilitate it being a little bit easier for you. So you don't have to think about it as much. So
Yeah.
she actually cut back on a lot of the alarms, which was really great for him. And it does actually, I do get a lot more rest now with the CGM. That was a blessing. We started before kind of CGMs were in the market, and yeah, that was exhausting. But like you said, now with the technology, it's so much easier and it's just so much better. Yeah, sometimes annoying
Yeah.
if it's alarming too much, and I'll hear it. Like my son doesn't act on the first sound, and I'm like, hey, what's the pump saying? By the way, over there, yeah. So yeah, it's a little tricky. So I want to jump to then November's coming, and you know, I have a lot of feelings around the month of November because for you, for my son, and everyone else living with diabetes is every day. We don't need a special month to remind us about it, but it's a great time to do advocacy education, talk about it, get people thinking about it in different ways. And you have, and actually the reason we met, someone sent me your video. You have a very interesting, exciting thing that you're doing in the month of November. And so can you tell us some more about that, please?
Yeah. So we're going to do a crazy ultra triathlon over 3 days. And the reason we're doing it is because I met originally a parent who was having those troubles we've just talked about, not sleeping. Son wasn't particularly caring about his situation, and I want to find a way that we can create a community of young diabetics that can talk and share experiences, and you know, so they don't feel the stigma of diabetes. And I wanted to create a community of parents as well that could share their strains and stresses and their worries that, you know, their bloodline might get sick from a complication. So, and then it was about creating communication structures that helped people manage the stress of diabetes and actually help them give each other more control with less control. So through providing autonomy and frameworks, they actually were more comfortable with each other and the way each other were managing a situation. And one of the ways we thought we would try and do that is we would try and do something that was was a bit crazy. So we're going to do an ultra triathlon on the 18th, 19th, and 20th of November. It started out, actually, the event started out as a bike race. We were going to create a group of cyclists that were just diabetics. I met two guys here and a few other people in Singapore and Australia, and a lady here as well. And then we just went, well, why don't we just do a triathlon and make it an ultra triathlon? So on the 18th, we're swimming 11 kilometers on the in the ocean. So we'll start at Dubai Offshore Sailing Club and we'll swim out to the World Islands, and then we'll swim back and we'll swim a little bit up and down the coast just to finish the 11 Ks, so up towards the canal and back, probably not that far. Then we'll head up to Al Qudra and we'll do 100 kilometers of cycling. Then we'll go home for some rest. And then the next day on the 19th, we'll do what they call the Coast to Coast, which is an organized bicycle race from Sharjah to Al-Aqsa. And it's 215 kilometers.
And there's quite an elevation there from what I understand as well. It's not flat.
No, it's so between Shoka, between Red Rock, or what do they call it? Fossil Rock. And Kalba, there are quite a few mountains. So the total elevation will be about 1,500 meters, 1,600 meters, over 215 k. So it's relatively flat as a cycle ride, but there is a portion of the ride that's quite hilly, which makes it difficult because it's right in the middle. Then on day 3, we are going to run 4 marathons. So we're going to run 168.8 kilometers. And our original plan for this was we were going to run, so we're going to cycle to Alaka and then we were going to run back. But it became a logistical nightmare because the roads aren't really safe for traveling at such a slow speed. And the fact that we want to make a big deal out of this to build awareness around Diabetes Awareness Month and helping diabetics around the community idea, we thought, why take that kind of risk? Why don't we do it somewhere where people can get involved and we can keep it within local communities as well? So we're going to run the first marathon in the Springs, the Meadows and the Lakes area. We're going to run the second marathon around JLT, JBR, Marina, a bit on the Palm. Then we're going to run the third marathon around the beach area and up toward, Al Barsha, the beach. So there'll be a bit of crossing over that we'll do. And then we'll do the fourth marathon around Nadal Sheba and Business Bay. Downtown. What we'd really love to do is when we finish the run, it would be amazing if we could have the Diabetes Awareness Month ribbon or our logo on the Burj Khalifa.
Burj Khalifa people, if you're listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Please help. Who can help?
MR.
Yeah.
I think they have a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And through the whole event, there are three words that really pull all of this together, and the first one is community, the second one is communication, and the third one is health. So we want to build a big community that communicate really well together in and around being healthy for diabetes. And we're taking those three words quite seriously in the event. So we're all at different levels in terms of sports fitness. So Adam Holt and I are the two type 1 diabetics, and we have another person that's doing it with us. We're all at different levels from a sporting perspective. And we've said that there are two rules. One, be honest when you can't carry on. Don't drag us all down. If you really can't finish and you're just procrastinating, be honest, make the difficult decision. And the second rule is, as long as we can keep going, we're all staying together. And we're going to communicate. We're going to live healthy together for 3 days.
Amazing.
Keep that whole ethos together, and hopefully from that people will understand the message that we're trying to get out there, that it's okay to talk about diabetes. It's okay to tell people you have diabetes. Diabetes doesn't create a boundary for you in anything, or certainly most things, and there are people there to talk to if you want to talk to people as well. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. The run is the difficult bit. And we won't have the day 1 and day 2 will be relatively, one for a better word, easy. But day 3 is a complete unknown. We don't actually know. The furthest any of us have ever run is 100 kilometers. So whilst 164 marathons, in my head is, okay, just get through the first one, then we'll do the second one, and then we'll do the third one and be okay. Then I think about how I felt after the 2 marathons I ran together and think, wow, now I'm going to run another 2. And I've had to spend time thinking about how I'm going to get those thoughts out of my head, because and I had another guy who was thinking about doing it with us, and he just said he just couldn't conceptualize what it was going to be like. And I kept saying to him, don't, because we can't figure it out. It's impossible. We'll only know when we experience it for the first time. And that's why the community piece is so important, because when we desperately need each other, we're going to be there for each other, because we have no idea what's around the corner. And that's just like diabetes, especially when you've been newly diagnosed. You don't know what's around the corner, and you need a group of people with you who can help and support you along that really scary journey. which it really is. It's scary when you're trying out new things and you've never heard of it before and all that kind of stuff. So that's where we're trying to get to. And we'd like it to become something for the future. We'd like to carry on doing crazy things after this as well. And well, not crazy things. I just think things that people with diabetes have quite rightly able to do. It's, you know, all I need to do differently to a normal person is manage my blood sugar.
Amazing.
My body still works the same. In terms of my feet still go the same speed. The joints, the feet and knees and all of that. But that is an amazing vision. And we'll put as much as we can that we have now in the links in the show notes. And then I think as more details roll out, because I'm sure that there's people that would love to, particularly on the run, the day of the run, come out, see you, be there, like we talked, maybe run with you for a bit, and whatever else that we can do to get people out to support. So as much information as we can, we'll put it out in the show notes, or we'll put it out in other ways on the Diapoint website and social media as it develops. I'll give you I'll share with you the route, the running route that we've planned, because what would be absolutely amazing for anybody that's listening, if we could get a number of type 1 diabetic kids to come along and do some portions of the run with us, where we can share experiences, we can talk to each other, we can answer any questions they've got, even if their parents want to come along as well and do the running with them, and we can create a real community around it. It certainly won't be a fast run. It could be a run walk. And that would be incredible. That would be inspiring for us, to help us get through the run at the same time as we're hopefully going to help people change their lives.
That would be amazing. And actually, as you've been talking about it, even though I heard about it before, and now I have a few other people that I want to reach out to, that see if they can get involved. And then I think they'd love to support and they'd be interested. It's truly amazing and it's inspiring. And I think it also gives us so much hope for the future and just what's possible. Nothing is impossible. If you're doing all of these things with diabetes, there's nothing that's impossible.
I think about it when it comes to me as a body, thinking about me being how do I best describe this? Because you used the commercial airline pilot as a description before, as something that's probably not possible, because the risk of you having a problem, and that in falling onto other people's lives is something that we have to accept, that we just can't, unless things change, we just can't do those things. But where it's me and I'm in control and I'm taking the risks for me as my body, then I manage those things, and there are no boundaries. I honestly don't see that there are boundaries in that realm. I just need to make sure that I have the team of people around me who are. So my wife, in my ultra triathlon before, my wife would be constantly checking my blood sugar for me and throwing me Snickers bars or Mars bars as she was seeing the trending going down. So we were continually working together as a team to manage. So yeah, we were just managing, and I just can't stress enough this piece about there is nothing in the way of living a normal life. There's just a few other bits that you need to do.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this hour, so that we've had a chance to learn more about you, about your amazing athletic abilities, but also the wisdom that you brought to us, I think is something so important for people to listen to and understand. And I hope that if you are in Dubai or in the UAE, that you can come out for one of these days, or all of them, the 18th, 19th, 20th. You can look to the Diapoint site for where to find more information about that. We'll be sharing it. Also, we'll have Nick's social media links in the show notes as well, so you can follow Nick. or if you have any questions, drop us an email at info@diapointme.com, and we will send pass all of that on directly to Nick so you can follow up with him. And we're happy to be a part of this journey. We're so excited, and we're looking forward to it.
Definitely. I must say, just to kind of from my perspective, meeting you is the best thing that's happened to this challenge as well, and this thing that we want to do. We finally met someone that actually has the health of the diabetes community at the center of what they do, and that to us as a set of athletes is really, really important. So we want to thank you as well for coming along on the journey with us.
Oh, thank you.
You know, being part of.
No, that's really special, because that is why I do what I do, and that is why Diapoint does what it does. And sometimes I can't believe the people that have joined my team, but because that is what we do. First and foremost, we want to help people. We want to support people. We want people to be inspired and do all of these things that they were told weren't possible with diabetes. I mean, it baffles me how many people still, even though we have all of these success stories, but people still see it as something they should hide, or something that they can't do the things that they love doing because of it. So we're just really happy to be a part of it. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So we'll see you soon. And hopefully everyone that's listening, we'll see you on the 18th, 19th, and 20th of November. So stay tuned.